I'm going to throw this on over to our moderators, Dr. Daryl Carter and Jules Corriere, and they're going to lead our session here. And if you have comments or questions throughout, make sure you use that chat to interact with us. And we'll also have a allotted time at the end for you to ask questions directly and get some answers back from our guests. So thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Sky. Good morning, everyone. I hope all of you are doing well today. We're so tickled that you're with us, and we're going to go ahead and start questions here in just a moment. But Jules, will you go ahead and introduce our guest?
Yes, and before I introduce our guest, we've got a few just housekeeping and ground rules. Please do introduce yourselves in the chat bar if you'd like, who you are and where you're from, or maybe the organization that you're with. That'll kind of give us an idea of who we've got with us this morning. We've got some wonderful panelists that are here today. And remember, we're all human as we are discussing some of these topics. Let's keep, just as a reminder, to keep the chat room respectful and inclusive of everybody who is here. We've got our panelists who are each going to give an introduction of themselves and of their organizations at the top. Then we are going to provide a series of questions for them to answer. After that, you'll each in the chat room, if you've had some questions arise, Sky will be monitoring that, and we'll have an opportunity to check on those questions when we get there. The first person that I would like to call on is Gail, who's already prepared a short presentation for us to kind of give us an idea of her work and her organization and the things that that they are doing for inclusive tourism. So Gail Chiak.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting us to share our programs and the ways that IANTA works with tribes to help them tell their stories and their histories and share them with the public. IANTA is the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association. Our mission is to define, introduce, grow, and sustain American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian tourism that honors traditions and values. We do a lot of training for tribes on how to develop their attractions and to promote them. We have a couple of publications that we've recently released that are available for anyone to download. One is Cultural Heritage Tourism, the other one's a Travel and Trade Manual. We operate NativeAmerica.travel, which is a destination website for tribes. We all of the listings are generated by the tribes and approved by them. Here you'll see one of our profiles of Salmon King Fisheries. Also, we have quite an active social media campaign to promote these destinations. We have a number of partnerships with U.S. public lands agencies. I work with the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, the Juan Bautista de Anza National Trail, the California National Trail, and then we have a pilot project with Mount Rainier, just developing guides to how tribes can work with parks to tell their stories there and to share their tourism programs so that they can serve as a gateway community and get some of the visitors to the tribal lands. We also work with the U.S. Forest Service on programs that collaborate with the parks and the tribes. With the Lewis and Clark and Juan Bautista de Anza Trail, we identify tribal attractions, and with Juan Bautista, we're actually publishing a tour guide. And with the Lewis and Clark, we're populating a Lewis and Clark website, as well as our own nativeamerica.travel website. For each of the trails, we not only tell the story of the tribes that are along the trail, but we also tell the story of the tribes that were there historically. Many of them have been moved away from the trails, so we also include the attractions of those tribes that are off the trail. We have a number of education programs. Every year we do a tourism conference and bring together tribes and the industry to share trends, do training. We have a webinar program with webinars every month to help our industry grow and learn more. We have a scholarship program to provide funding for students. We have a certificate program with George Washington University on cultural heritage tourism. We have another one with Arizona State University for sustainable tourism. We have a visitor outreach program to try and share our attractions with the international community. We have a tribal row at IPW. We have partnership with Brand USA, and we do FAM tours every year. We just finished the Southern California tour, and we'll be going to Alaska later this year. We also have partnership with Go West, so that tribes can attend at a lower rate. Our newest program is an arts and cultural program where we're working with tribes to promote and help develop their artists. We're encouraging tribes to develop arts programs for their artists. We also have a art market during our annual conference where we bring in a photographer to take professional photographs of the artists and their work. We have a Buy Native web page, which tells you where you can go online to buy Native art. And we also have a series of webinar programs. We like projects like this where we can come out and talk with communities about how they can include their tribes in their region and work in partnership. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. Up next, we've got Stephanie Jones. Excuse me. I'm dealing with the end of a head cold, so pardon me. So Stephanie, who is coming to us from, I believe, San Diego this morning. Is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, and please welcome Stephanie Jones.
Thank you very much for having me. Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and to be a part of this conversation. I represent several different organizations in travel and tourism. I'm here today representing the Cultural Heritage Economic Alliance, CHEA for short. We're a 501c3 organization based out of Washington, D.C. And CHEA's mission is really focused on creating equitable opportunities for small BIPOC suppliers to actively participate and profit in their local tourism ecosystems. We work with them to help these smaller businesses from underrepresented and underserved communities to become tourism and market ready so that they can do business in the trillion-dollar industry. Prior to the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, most small Black businesses or suppliers were not actively participating in travel and tourism, and primarily because people just don't know about them when they're traveling to different destinations. They're not linked in with their local destination marketing organizations, and travelers don't know how to find them, although they do provide those local, authentic cultural heritage experiences. So the work that Chia does is, one, identifying these smaller suppliers in U.S. destinations, and then helping them to become tourism and market ready through our Diversity Tourism Academy that really helps them understand the global travel and tourism industry and how to become positioned to profit and participate in it. We also work very closely in partnership with the Cultural Heritage Alliance for Tourism, which is a Black-owned receptive tour operator company based out of Miami, Florida. And how our partnership works is, once we provide education and technical assistance and capacity building through our Diversity Tourism Academy for these smaller suppliers, then we create equitable opportunities for them to actually participate in the industry. And we do that through our partner, Chat for short, the tour operator. Chat works specifically to curate single and multi-day Black cultural heritage tours that amplify and celebrate Black history and culture throughout the United States. And by partnering with these small suppliers that graduate through the Diversity Tourism Academy and become certified through the Diversity Tourism Academy, Chat and Chia are now able to leverage tourism as an economic driver to fuel these local businesses and these underserved communities by driving consistent tourist foot traffic and revenues into these businesses. So we have created this public-private partnership model that we have been doing since 2016. And now where we are is we travel throughout the US to identify partners, and we partner with local destination marketing organizations as a way, again, to create equitable opportunities and to help these smaller stakeholders to be able to sustain their businesses and grow their businesses in travel and tourism. So I'm excited to be part of this conversation. There's a lot of other things I do. I do serve on the United States Travel and Tourism Advisory Board, which is an appointed position by the Secretary of Commerce. In my role, I advise the Secretary of Commerce on different public policy issues impacting travel and tourism in the United States. So I'll stop right there for now.
Thank you so much. Our next panelist, Ms. Jenny Veal, if you'll please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Jenny Veal. I'm based outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I live in Sequatchie County. And I currently work for the Tennessee Department of Tourist Development as the Rural Destination Development Manager. And I've been in that position since March of last year. I work on tourism development with our rural counties, which are the economically distressed and at-risk counties across the state. There's about 44 counties that we're working with. We're currently hosting planning sessions in every rural county, which are discussions about tourism assets and opportunities in those communities to create what we're calling tourism roadmaps. And of course, we're talking a lot about cultural heritage tourism in all of our counties. Tennessee is a top 10 state for cultural heritage tourism and is a catalyst for economic growth. People are drawn to communities that have preserved a strong sense of their historical identity. Previously, I worked as a freelance writer for many years when my daughters were young, writing about family travel related to the outdoors and history, as well as conservation topics. So I've been a history nerd for a long time. In 2022, I launched a cultural heritage podcast called Travel Embers. And the focus of that podcast is to help inspire travel to historic sites by telling the stories about what happened in those places to try to bring, get people's interest in visiting. So far, I've published 2 episodes about Fort Loudon State Park and Sequoia Birthplace Museum, which are both in Vonore, Tennessee. But I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and really to hear from everybody else, because we are definitely looking for partners in our rural communities on cultural heritage, tourism, interpretation, and development. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Jules, I think it's probably time for us to start the questioning. Still on mute.
It is. I've got it. We got together and started thinking about some questions that you all would particularly be able to answer for us, especially some of our organizations that are that may not have a lot of practice in doing inclusive tourism right now, but we want to learn. So the first question that we've got for all of you really is, what are some programs that you've seen or experienced in our region or in other regions that serve as examples of outstanding inclusive tourism? We're talking kinds of best practices here.
Well, I'll start. As I was describing the work that we do and the tour development model that we have created and been implementing since 2016, there is no other tour product development model such as the one that we have. And I say that because, working in partnership with Chat, the receptive tour operator, they are not your ordinary tour operator that is only focused on bringing travelers to destinations and generating revenue, which is great. Yes, they are in business to make money, but they dive deeper into communities, and particularly underserved and underrepresented communities, to uncover and discover those hidden cultural gems, those small businesses that are off the beaten path that people often don't know about or are not exposed to when they travel. So our business model is intentional about showcasing and amplifying those smaller cultural heritage assets and businesses that are found in those off the beaten path heritage neighborhoods, rural communities that, again, most people don't know about. Unfortunately, because a lot of the destination marketing organizations, they do not do an adequate job of amplifying these underserved communities, because one, tourism is very much a pay-to-play industry. And if you are a small business or attraction, it's very expensive for you to join these local destination marketing organizations and to participate in all of the key industry events so that you can promote and sell your business or your products and services. And so we have been intentional through our model, again, in leveling the playing field and creating equitable opportunities so that these smaller suppliers not only can access the industry and tap into business growth opportunities, but again, we dive deeper and we train them and help them understand the global travel and tourism industry so that they can become tourism and market ready to do business in it. Because in most Black communities, the small businesses are really, they consider themselves mom and pop businesses. And the reality is they're good at what they do, but they're not necessarily good at operating a business or marketing a business. And that's where we come in through our business model. We want to make certain that they are prepared to participate and profit in the industry. So we make certain that we invest the time and the resources into these businesses from underserved communities so that they can then become partners in these tour products that amplify Black cultural heritage. Right now, we're providing these experiences, single and multi-day itineraries that amplify Black cultural heritage throughout the Southeast region of the United States. So throughout Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and then we're getting ready to head into Alabama and Tennessee. I'm on the West Coast now because today I'm headed to LA because now we're building out Black LA cultural heritage tours. So the business model is to partner with as many of these underrepresented small Black suppliers that are tour operators, restaurant owners, B&B owners, cultural museums, local artists, and to help them understand the industry so that they can then become engaged and participants in it, and they can leverage the industry to build profitable business and sustainable businesses.
I
Wow,
think
so
one
you're
of
really, that's incredible. So you're really amplifying the local so that more people can know about them and then find them and go to them. How,
Absolutely. But a big part of that is we can help people find them, but if they're not ready and prepared to receive them, and when I say that, if they don't open when they say they open, when there's not adequate customer service, when again, the quality of the experience is lacking. So we make certain that we help them address those issues from a business operational standpoint before we even start to bring tourists to them, because we want people to write positive reviews so that more people will read about them and then come and patronize them, even if they're not taking our tour. Okay.
thank you.
Mhm.
One of my favorite tourism programs in Indian country is the Akwesasne tourism program. They're in their lands span New York and Canada, but they've developed a project where they help their community develop their tour products. They started with several artists who would do demonstrations and show people how to create a basket or about lacrosse and how you play the game, how they build the sticks, sharing the history and the culture of that, and tour the lacrosse factory. But they do a special program where they really try to reach out to the community and find people who would have an interest in sharing their culture with the public. So they start off with a mentoring program where they will do training on how to set up their business, how to promote it, and work with them hand in hand to build their tours. And then once they're ready, then they add that to the nation's tour program and promote it. They've now developed, I think, 5 different tours, and they have 4 that are in the beginning stages. So they said the biggest hurdle was to find the people within their community that were interested in sharing their culture and learning how to do presentations to the public. But that they've become very, very successful. They now have a number of programs that they're presenting to the public, and have received wonderful reviews for their programs.
Okay, thank you. Jules, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Gail. Could you in the chat put the website of that group that you were just talking about? I'm sure that we would all love to be able to check that out on our own. What a great resource. Jenny.
Sure. So I have 3 quick examples of museums that or operations, 2 in the state and 1 out of the state, that I think are doing an amazing job and that were really intriguing to me. The Sequoia Birthplace Museum in Vonore, Tennessee, is a property of the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians. And so it interprets and promotes the understanding and appreciation of the history and culture of the Cherokee people in East Tennessee, with a focus on Sequoia, who was actually born right there in that area in the village of Tuskegee, and single-handedly created the Cherokee syllabary. So to me, it's really exciting to go to this museum and have the interpretation be by the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians and them telling their story. A similar museum is, we just drove across the country the first week of January, and we're following the Oregon Trail to some degree, driving our daughter to Washington State. And I'm probably not going to pronounce this right, but it's the Temasclet Cultural Institute on the Umatilla Indian Reservation, which is near Pendleton in Eastern Oregon. And it's another Native American museum, or Native American owned and operated museum along the historic Oregon Trail, and it's run by the indigenous people who have lived on that land for generations, and talks about the culture of 3 of the tribes of Native Americans there. And it was fascinating. We wanted to spend an hour there, and we spent 3 hours there. Back to Tennessee, my final example is the Nearest Green Distillery in Shelbyville, Tennessee, is a really cool example of kind of taking the Jack Daniel's story and digging into the history of what actually happened and all the people involved. And so Nathan Nearest Green was an enslaved man who taught Jack Daniel's to make Tennessee whiskey, and was the first master distiller for the Jack Daniel distillery as a free man after the Civil War. So he has the first spirit named after an African American. You can visit the distillery in Shelbyville, Tennessee. And so it's a fascinating historical component that hasn't been told up until recently. I think the museum opened in about 2017. I don't have the date, but people are loving it and loving to know that important part of history related to the Jack Daniel's distillery in that area. So those are my 3 examples.
Thank you. That is terrific. I'm going to go ahead with our next question, and that is, what kinds of things do travelers look for in messaging that assures them that your destination is one that is inclusive and inviting?
I'll start. Authenticity. That's so critical. And we consult with a lot of DMOs, especially since the Black Lives Matter movement. Destination marketing organizations, reached out to say, well, we want to be more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. We want to reach more diverse audiences. We want to communicate the diversity in our destinations, but how do we do that? And the first place that pretty much we tell them to start with is your marketing collateral and your messaging, because one, if your marketing collateral is not reflective of your community and those, diverse audiences or traveler groups that you want to attract to your communities, then you're already missing the mark. And also, if your messaging is only geared toward one audience, and it's not speaking to diverse audiences, then you're also missing the mark. And so many destinations have been intentional about trying to get it right when they are communicating to diverse audiences of travelers that they want to attract. They're being more intentional about amplifying diverse experiences and businesses on their websites. A lot of DMOs have listings of Black-owned businesses, restaurants, tour operators and tour guides and cultural museums, to make it accessible for inbound travelers to be able to identify suppliers that provide diverse experiences and products. So the messaging, it has to be authentic. And the challenge with a lot of destinations is that they don't have diverse teams. So they don't have people, a diverse team that can speak to diverse audiences. The second challenge or issue for destinations is that they don't know their local communities. They don't venture into the diverse communities to meet local businesses, to experience different cultures. So they can't effectively write about what they don't know and what they haven't experienced. So we always recommend, and we even work with some DMOs to actually help them develop the messaging for their marketing collateral as well as their websites. But we say, if you don't have representation on your team that's connected to your local community, first, change that, do something about it. Secondly, if you don't have that representation, then hire someone, a consultant that can help you develop authentic messaging, targeting different diverse audiences, because you cannot use the same messaging to communicate to diverse audiences. So being intentional about understanding, market segmentation and how to communicate with diverse audiences, how to make certain that you're amplifying and showcasing diversity within your marketing collateral so that people can even see that this is some place that I want to be. I know there's research that says more than 70% of African Americans determine which destination they visit based on, one, the number of cultural heritage experiences that are there, but also based on going to the website, going to social media, and seeing if there's anyone that looks like them represented in their marketing. And so, again, a lot of destinations have been intentional over the past couple of years about making certain that their messaging and their marketing is reflective of their diverse communities, but also to appeal to diverse audiences that they want to attract to their destinations.
I think authenticity is also very important to Native American communities, and often so much so that all of the tours that are provided have to go through a screening by the tribes. The Sitka tribe, before they do a tour, they have to present it to the elders in the community, and the elders have to approve what's being said that represents their community. They also tell them the etiquette that they want shared with the public, and how people should train the tour operators to behave when they're in tribal communities. So if there's an outside tour company that's coming in, they provide guidance to them so that they can not do anything that might offend the tribal community, but also to learn about the tourists that are coming in, so that they will understand how best to make their presentations to that group. I think the main thing with Native communities is that because it's all one community, you have to make sure your community is supporting what you're doing, so that they feel comfortable in having visitors come to their territory and visit their homes.
Thank you.
And I would agree that with Stephanie and Gail, that just that being intentional in marketing and authentic in interpretation is really important, and getting help with the interpretation and marketing, as Stephanie had suggested. I think that it can sometimes be hard to find where to get help with interpretation. And so that is a need I have seen, and something that I know, we are interested in our rural development efforts is, just resources for us. But as far as the marketing piece, I know like for us, when we stopped at the museum in on the Umatilla Indian Reservation, part of what drew us in their marketing was that it said it is the, in their marketing on Google Maps, on their website, that it was the only Native American museum along the historic Oregon Trail run by the indigenous people and, interpreted by. And that to me was a huge draw. Like I knew what I was getting into and was very intrigued with that. And it was amazing. So I think that marketing piece is really important. And can I add one other quick thing? Just Gail was talking about just teaching the people who are doing the interpretation about kind of the words to use and being empathetic to cultures. And I think there's that great opportunity at these sites to teach visitors as well about how to talk about some of the difficult times in our history and what words to use. I know there was a museum in Savannah, Georgia that we went to, and they had a sign on the wall as you were getting your ticket that said words have power, and talks about how the words we use today impact how we relate to one another, how we relate to the past, but also how we relate to one another today. And I think there is a great need for that education. But it was talking about, the use of the word slave versus enslaved woman and what the difference meant, because saying slave implies that the woman was at her core a slave.
And born that way. Yes.
Right. And so, but using enslaved means that she was in bondage, but her bondage was not her core existence. And I took a picture of it, and I can't tell you how many times I've looked at it and thought that was really important. It was important to me. I learned so much from that. And that was just a sign on the wall as we were walking in. But I think teaching all of us how to be empathetic in the words that we use and how we talk about history and difficult history is important and a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. If I could just piggyback on that, Jenny, you're so right. I'm actually here at the International Inbound Tour Operator Conference. And yesterday when I was speaking, I made the point because, yes, someone actually asked me, well, they're not certain, how they should refer to me. Do I use the word Black? Do I call you African American? I did address that. I said, I'm both. I am a Black person, which means I'm of African descent. But Black is not a monolith. What people need to understand that there are different cultures within, Black people. And so, but the point that I was making to them is that oftentimes tour operators, non-Black tour operators, they shy away from telling the full American story because they don't want people to feel uncomfortable, or they make the assumption that people will feel uncomfortable. That has not been our experience when we do our tours, because we talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. We talk about the pains of the past, but we also talk about the triumphs, and we celebrate the contributions of African Americans, to our country. So it is a balanced story, but we can't negate the fact that what happened to the enslaved Africans and African Americans during the Civil Rights Movement, that's part of our history, and we can't erase it, even though some people in Florida are trying to. But I live in Florida. That's why I feel that, I have a strong view about it. But, the point that I was making to them, don't make the assumption that people coming from other parts of the world don't want the full American story. They don't want to hear the truth. Okay. They don't want the sugar-coated version of American history, which has been fed to most travelers, or they're only given a limited part of the Black story, which is the civil rights movement. And we know that there's more than 400 years of Black history, and the civil rights movement, which is a very important part of our history, it's not the sum of Black history in America. And it's important for people to understand that it's okay to have uncomfortable conversations. But what's important is that who's leading the conversation, okay? Because we tell all of our guests, please ask questions, whatever you're thinking, because that's the only way we're going to break down barriers. We're going to build understanding of Black people in America and our experience, but also so we can be able to provide the balanced story of the Black experience in America. And that's why we partner directly with local Black historians, descendants of the West Africans that were brought over during the enslavement. So we allow people from the communities who represent the history and who understand and know the history. They're the ones that share the history authentically, because they're the ones that can then address the questions that people have, and they can have those more in-depth conversations about race and racism, enslavement, all of the things that Black people endure, the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think it's important that people, especially tour operators, are not afraid to expose people to the full American story and to stop making assumptions that people can't handle the truth. Because most people who are coming inbound into the United States, they're already, they are experienced travelers who seek the truth when they're traveling globally. It's just when they come to America, they're spoon-fed the truth because people make the assumption that they don't want to make people feel uncomfortable by telling the full American story.
And I would add too, just in working with communities, that there is just a great need for education, like you said, because all of us have learned little snippets of history. And so then you end up in a job in tourism or as a tour guide. And how much is that individual going to do research versus how do we arm them with this information, provide this information so that they feel confident in talking about it? Because some of it's, just being comfortable. Like, I don't know what words to use. So I know,
to your point, we would rather allow ignorance to run rampant than to educate people, than to allow people to be able to learn about African American history in the curriculums in schools. So it's really up to individuals and parents to be responsible for making certain that they seek out Black cultural heritage tours, Native American tours, if they genuinely want to be educated about the full American story.
That is so important, because it's not just this issue of empathy, but, getting that full story, getting people engaged in that learning and being proactive about it. And then also, speaking as a historian, understanding that Black Americans are not monolithic.
Yeah.
There are differences in terms of experience, where you're at, and space and time. And that's so important. I just led a panel of student athletes the other night here on the East Tennessee State campus to talk about their experiences. And there were 5 Black athletes, 2 of which were female. And one of the things I included in there was, for our 2 female athletes, tell us about your experience, because this idea that we're all the same is really, really damaging. And you could see some people in the crowd kind of, whoa. And, you could see that the 2 female athletes really give a differing opinion about what was happening based on, harassment, or based on, perceptions that they're going to be angry Black women, or, those things, which my male students weren't thinking about at all in the same context. And so the empathy, listening, getting engaged, and understanding that they're not monolithic are very, very important. So thank you.
And I know Gail could speak to this probably much better than I am, but we've had, and I'll make this short, but we had a recent experience we work with the Cherokee Removal Memorial Park, which is in Birchwood, Tennessee. And we had a meeting recently with a group of people from the McClung Museum in Knoxville, as well as there was someone from the Muskogee Creek Nation and someone from the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians. And we were just talking to them about, interpretation and really getting more involvement from the Muskogee Creek Nation and the Eastern Band involved in that conversation. And one of the things that the woman from the Creek Nation had said was, in Eastern Tennessee, particularly, we have a lot of Trail of Tears markers across the whole state, which is really important to have, that history and mark that history. But we don't do a lot with telling the story before the Trail of Tears and what was going on. And she had said she would really like to see more of that. And I think that is a missing link, again, in the cultural landscape of Tennessee, that's a big piece that's missing. And we've done a good job with the signage, at least for the routes of the Trail of Tears. But before that, this was an entire nation. So anyways, I don't know, Gail, if you have anything to add to that.
One of the, we give out destination awards to tribes every year. And this past year, we gave one to Tatanka Res Tours. They do tours of the Wounded Knee battlefield. So a very difficult story to tell. And one of the things that they do is at the end of the tour, they do a ceremony to just commemorate and recognize the people who died in the battle, but on both sides. And then a celebration of the fact that we're still here. And I think that's one of the things, the stories we hear along both the Lewis and Clark and especially the Anza Trail, that we're still here. We were there before, we're still here, we're flourishing. With the Anza Trail, there are a lot of difficult feelings about the missions, about the fact that the tribes they lost their recognition, their federal status with the government through backroom deals, and that the tribes didn't even know, some of them for almost 50 years, that they were no longer recognized by the federal government, and now they're seeking their restoration. So just telling those stories is really important. And as we're developing our travel guide, we're finding it very difficult to tell that in a way that's truthful, but also that still encourages people to come and visit. And I think one of the things that I hear the most from visitors is, I don't understand why you don't hate us, and that you're so welcoming and bringing us in and sharing everything with us. They're amazed that tribes are still welcoming, the same way they were during Lewis and Clark, when they helped the visitors go through, the same as they did with the Anza Trail, helping them find their way. The tribes have always been welcoming, and they still are. It's a part of our culture.
That's an incredible story. And one of the things that Stephanie said just a little while ago makes the work that you all are doing is so much more important, is that educational aspect that you're providing, because students aren't getting it in schools, especially depending on what state that they live in. So the more that our historic sites and our tourism can educate the public, the more we can get away from the kind of diabetes tour, the candy coated, sugary sweet version that some people are still trying to dish out. I really honor the work that you all are doing to really give this in-depth education to people who are coming and welcoming the outsiders in to these places and educating them and providing this education. So important.
Thank you. It is very important, especially today, in the current political environment. I recall even when I was in school as a young person, learning about African American history was very limited. But I think people such as myself, the work that we do and the work that Gail and Sherry does through IANTA and even the tourism boards and the DMOs, it truly is our responsibility to be intentional about making certain that a broader narrative about the different cultures that exist and different stories that exist in destinations are shared and that are accessible. And so being intentional about including, these tours and these stories in marketing materials, in messaging, so that people know what exists in destinations as they're looking to, where to visit in the United States. What else can I experience when I come to Tennessee? I've already been to Nashville and I've been on, downtown and, done the touristy stuff. What else can I do? What else can I see? What can I learn about the area? My daughter lives in Nashville and I'll be there for a week next month, meeting with a Black tour operator who is doing civil rights tour of Nashville. And we're planning to visit Uncle Nearest because we want to partner and help amplify, that story, that part of our culture. But it requires intentionality. And that has been my word since 2020, intentionality, because we could talk about, how much we want businesses to be able to, destinations to be diverse and inclusive. But until we make up our mind that as a destination and as an industry, we are far more valuable and successful when we all succeed and when we create those opportunities for the smallest of us in this industry to actively participate and profit in the industry. And so we just have to, those of us who represent our stories need to, again, continue to make certain that we share more of them more broadly and that people who are seeking them domestically and internationally can access them. And that's where strategic partnerships with DMOs, with tourism boards, with heritage societies, with organizations such as IANTA, organizations such as CHIA, those strategic partnerships, they mean so much. And so that no one entity needs to feel like, well, I have to do this alone. Because again, if you don't have the talent on your team, then most likely you're just going to push back from the table and say, well, we don't have anybody that can be intentional about building relationships within our community, identifying the diverse stories that we can showcase and that we can tell in our destination. So until we get to that place as an industry, we're moving. I see us moving in that area. We're not there yet in a broad way. But there are some destinations that are getting it right, very few. But we have to keep having these conversations and letting people know that you don't have to do this alone. You partner with people to help fill in the gaps so that not doing something becomes an excuse because you don't have the talent on your team to execute.
Wow, Stephanie, that's incredible. And that actually leads into the next question that we have. It's one of our last questions, and then we'd like to maybe reach out to some of our listeners with some of their questions. But one final question you started to touch on is, what advice do you have for destinations such as historic sites and museums as far as programming goes that will make them more attractive to visitors from different cultures? You've done a great job of showing how your organizations have brought people there, but what can some of these other organizations do? What advice do you have for them so that they can do what they're doing better or get started on it?
Well, one, get started. Yesterday, as I was speaking to the tour operators, I said, for us, it's about three things. It's about intentionality, it's about partnership, and it's about investment. And all three are required to move the needle forward, to create sustainability in this industry. Because again, you have to want change to happen within your destinations. And so that does require you to look inward within your destination to see, are we missing the mark, and what more can we be doing as a DMO to make certain that we are inclusive and creating equitable opportunity for all of our stakeholders to be able to participate in their local tourism ecosystems. And then build, again, strategic partnerships. When we build out our tours, the first thing we do is we partner with local DMOs. Oftentimes, a lot of DMOs don't even know who the Black businesses are in their own destinations. But we come prepared. We do our own research to identify potential Black businesses and attractions that we want to partner with. So we've been able to build a bridge between a lot of Black communities and their local DMOs, especially if the DMOs don't have anyone that does multicultural marketing or tourism on their team, or anyone that actively engages in the local community to connect with local cultural heritage assets and businesses. So strategic partnerships are very, very important. And for us, the most important partnerships are with our small businesses. Getting the buy-in and trust from them, it takes time and it takes a lot of effort, because when you've never been invited to the table to participate, then you're a little skeptical. And one of the things that I continue to say to folks in this industry, it's great that you want to open the doors of opportunity now. But again, if people never knew that they could access that opportunity, they're not prepared for the opportunity. So just because you open the door, don't expect this influx of folks to start coming to the table to participate, because they don't even really understand the industry. And that's where we come in to fill in that gap, to help them understand the industry, to help get them tourism and market ready so that they can engage with their local DMOs and engage with other opportunities and be able to provide first-class, world-class experiences to inbound travelers. Then investment, that's the essential piece for anything that we're trying to do that we want to be sustainable. It takes money, and DMOs have to be willing to invest dollars, including a line item in their budgets for DEI sustainability. And it may look different in different forms based on the destination, but if you're not willing to invest in one, enhancing your local assets, cultural heritage assets, so that they can participate in their local tourism ecosystem. And two, if you're not willing to invest marketing dollars to target diverse, audiences, the Black leisure travel market is almost $110 billion market from 2019. And so a lot of DMOs are leaving dollars on the table because they're not investing in creating marketing and messaging targeted to diverse audiences. And so I think, again, those are the three things. Be intentional about taking action within your organization and externally within your community. Build those strategic partnerships to bring the talent and the expertise to the table to help you implement DEI internally and externally, to help you develop multicultural campaigns targeting diverse audience, to help you get your local stakeholders ready, and invest those dollars So really a lot of destinations are moving from calling themselves destination marketing organizations to calling themselves destination stewardship organizations, which is great. It sounds great. But again, if you're not intentional about being good stewards over your community, your climate, and cultures, then again, you're just talking. So that's from my perspective, what DMOs really need to be focusing on.
I agree wholeheartedly with Stephanie. The only thing I would add is that I think communities need to know their histories and they need to know their communities. I was on a panel with that was talking about how the Smithsonian should do outreach. And I loved it when one of the panelists said, "You guys keep asking about how to find our communities, but you can research and find out what someone ate in some village 1,000 years ago, but you can't find the Indians in the community. You can't find the Black people in the community.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is look, do some research, find out who's there, find out who's the mover and shaker in your Native communities, your Spanish communities, your Black communities, and include them, invite them to the table, and invite them over and over again." I'm always being approached by some agency or organization that says, "We invite them, but they don't come." Well, it's going to take more than just an invitation. It's going to take a phone call. It's going to take a visit, because I know we've had so many people come and write about us, write books about us, but never really bring us completely into the table. It's all from their perspective. So know your community, find out those people in your community, and it'll enrich your organization.
I agree and am definitely in agreement with everything Gail and Stephanie said. And it's definitely words that I will be using as well: the intentionality, strategic partnerships, and investment. So that's great.
Thank you. Well, we're at that point now where I'm going to give a couple of thoughts about what we've just heard, and we want to take some questions from the chat section. So, a lot of my work revolves around DEI and, of course, American political history. And we're at a point where the nation is having these huge conversations over race, over gender, over ethnicity, immigration status, sexuality, etc. And these conversations have been fraught with, strife and hurt feelings and anger and partisanship and all that kind of stuff. And I think in part what we have learned today is the importance not only of inclusivity, but valuable ways to engage, some best practices and how we can engage, the importance of, from a public morality sense of tourism, for example, being a valuable moral and economic avenue through which we can learn about ourselves and others and other people who don't look like us, sound like us, love like us, etc. And so this is really important because we're a country of 330 plus million human beings. And every one of us deserves dignity and respect. Every one of us deserves to be represented and have our stories told. And so as we think about, a usable pass, and we think about engaging in tourism, we have opportunities here to achieve certain ends which improve the lives and the quality of our the lives of our people and the quality of our dialogue. And so I'm going to leave it right there so that we can engage in some back and forth with our panelists and with you in the audience. But I just wanted to give a couple brief thoughts about what we've heard here today. So thank you. And Sky, if you can help a little bit with the chat questions, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. I sent one to Jules earlier, so maybe that's what we can start with.
Yes, I'm just scrolling to find it now, Sky.
Well, while you're looking for that, there is one here. How do you negotiate troubled history visually, verbally in your marketing collateral or in museums? How do you negotiate tension between education and exploitation? What are the best practices of marketing legacies of violence, or what experts might call dark tourism? And that's to anybody.
When you say troubled histories, I'm assuming you're talking about slavery, the civil rights movement. First, let's call it what it is. So people don't have to read between the lines or try to figure out what it is, you're trying to, say in a nice way. Let's call it what it is. I think it's not necessary in marketing to be, explicit with language, so if it's a tour, our Black History tour, in our marketing, our collateral. And this is also something when we went to visit some national parks and, that amplify, again, Black history. And one of them, it was called like Freedom. They had this exhibit called the Freedom of something. But then the image that they used was of a Black man shackled in chains with a shackle around his neck. And I stood there and my team, we looked at it, we was like, so how does this equate to freedom? And so we asked the park ranger, what was the thinking behind using this image with this messaging? Because there's a conflict here. And he actually agreed. And the fact that he knew that that image didn't align with the theme or the content that the exhibit was focusing on, they just let it be there. So imagine if I'm not a Black person, I'm a white person, and I'm looking at it and I don't really know any better whether or not I should question it. It's like, okay, so freedom for Black people is still being in bondage to a certain extent, but that's the messaging that people are receiving. So I think, again, if you're not an expert, if you don't have anyone on your team to really help you make certain that the imagery and the content that's used to market painful stories of the enslavement, of the civil rights, then it's so important to identify your local historians, hire consultants that are trained or educators from universities. There are people accessible that can help make certain that the information is presented with authenticity. So what I say is, although you don't have to be bold in using imageries of, an enslaved person with shackles in your marketing, but it's really about storytelling. It's more about storytelling. And again, having someone that can help you, provide a narrative that helps people understand what the experience is going to be about. So instead of saying troubled history, our tour, it showcases and features stories about enslaved people from West Africa that were brought over to Charleston and Beaufort and St. Helena Island. And now they have created this Gullah Geechee culture that amplifies the Gullah Geechee people who came from from West Africa. So it's about telling the story and letting folks know that, yes, you're going to learn about the enslaved people and the enslavement and the Reconstruction era and the civil rights movement, but you don't have to dive deep into that narrative in your marketing collateral. That's where your expert tour guides and local historians can then have a deeper conversation when they're with people so that people can then ask questions and be educated on a broader level. So being mindful again about the imagery that you're using to tell, painful stories and painful parts of Black history, Native American history, because at the end of the day, we are proud people as Black folks and Native Americans, right, Gail? Well, you're proud people. We're proud of our heritage. We're proud of the contributions that we have made to this country and continue to make in this country. So it's okay to lead with, again, whatever, something positive. It don't have to be something negative. Let's celebrating the pains of the past and the triumphs of today, through Black history and Black culture, recognizing that those pains are going to talk about the enslavement and the civil rights movement and the Reconstruction era and other parts in the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, so you don't have to give it all to people right in their face to make a point, but you do need to be authentic and make certain that the imagery that you use, that it aligns with the messaging that you're using so people aren't confused or people aren't offended. And just one other, I was recently in California last month, and I was at the Grammy Museum, and there is right now an exhibit called Black Hollywood. And the first thing you see when you walk into the exhibit, and it still freaks me out when I think about it, and actually it's a piece of art by a Black artist, but for it to be the very first thing that you see on a huge, it's like a 10 by 20 wall, and these are images of enslaved people doing profane things to each other. I mean, I was very offended, and not only me, but even white people who were with me were offended because so what does this have to do with Black Hollywood? And why is this the first introduction to Black Hollywood that I am forced to digest? Now, I know it's a piece of art, but again, I asked the curator, I'm like, so tell me, why is this the first thing people see when we walk into this exhibit called Black Hollywood? and what's the connection to this piece of art and Black Hollywood? And again, the same thing, she was like, well, really couldn't give me an answer, and even everybody I was with, other tour operators, non-Black, they were offended as well, because I'm like, this is actually, it wasn't painful. It was just to provide that as the first thing you see. It didn't make sense as a Black person. So imagine as a white person who's coming into this exhibit and all you're seeing are these really profane descriptors of Black people doing disgusting things to each other. It didn't make sense. But I think, she tied it back to Uncle Tom's Cabin. So that's where the connection was. But again, there was no context provided to set it up to say this, there was nothing on the wall that gave you context about why this was the first thing you saw. And, although it was connected back to Uncle Tom's Cabin, it was just poorly done. And so again, that's why if you don't know, and I said, did you have a historian or anybody on your team curating this? And she said that she did. But I'm like, okay, you all should have did a focus group or something just to get some feedback. Because if we had a lot of questions, I can only imagine that other people would question that piece of art in its context in a Black Hollywood exhibit.
I would also encourage people to talk with experts or historians. When we approach the Anza Trail, the story of the missions and their enslavement of the Native people, taking them away from their homes, was a very hard thing to talk about. So we really reached out into the communities and tried to find someone who could talk about it from both angles. And we were able to find actually a Native person who worked at the Mission Dolores and helped them change their curation and their way of telling the story. And so we had conversations with him about how do we approach this in our travel guide. And we're able to, I think, understand the history a little more. But because he worked for the church, he was able to explain the church's history and the church's side, so that we were able to write this into our travel guide in a way that is accurate, but is also sensitive to both stories. And at one time, I served on the Columbus Quincentenary Advisory Committee, and it was actually because no one else wanted to sit on it. So it was like, okay, Gail, you got to go and represent us. But I found it a very enriching experience, because I sat there with the folks from Spain and the Irish American community, and we found one thing in common, that we all were very proud of our cultures. And the Irish said, we didn't make Columbus a hero in our story. We just wanted to promote the fact that we have an Irish American culture that was under fire at the time that we set up the Columbus Day as a national holiday. And the Spanish said the same thing. Columbus wasn't our hero. We put him in chains for what he did. But we were able to find that common ground, which was that we were all proud of our cultures. And so we were able to go forward. And I think that's what you have to do with some of these histories. You have to also sort of take a look at all of the different sides and then present your part of the story.
Thank you.
I would just add, as far as examples, I had noticed that California has recently launched an Explore Native American Culture campaign in promoting and working with the tribes in California, the Native indigenous peoples, to promote the cultural heritage and sites that people can go to. And I thought that was really, for a whole state to be doing that is really exciting, and that they're connecting with the people who can tell those stories best. So I shared a link to an article about that, but it inspired me as an approach.
Thank you. And I know we're just about to wrap up, but one thing I'd really like to reflect on is, and each of our panelists have hit on it, is there's so much more history than just the history of trauma for our, there's Black history and Native American history is American history. And it contains trauma, but it also contains victories and rich heritage and love and these amazing stories. And I think sometimes when cultural institutions think about, presenting stories of different groups, they go right toward the trauma rather than toward the victories and the contributions and the things like that. And I just wanted to see if there were any final thoughts from our panelists about these ideas and any wrap up things that you would that you haven't said yet that you'd like to provide to our listeners.
Gail, do you want to go first, or Jenny?
No, go ahead.
Well, actually, what I would love to do is just to summarize what I've been saying and why the work that we do is so important and what it looks like when it's done with authenticity and with intentionality. So if you all wouldn't mind, I would love to share with you a 60-second video of our Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Tour that we launched earlier last month. We did a press trip and we took international and national press to experience the Gullah Geechee Tour that starts in Charleston. We go to Beaufort and St. Helena Island, South Carolina, and then we wrap in Savannah, Georgia. And throughout, people have the opportunity to connect with locals, descendants of the Gullah Geechee people. They connect with Black churches. They get to talk about issues such as critical race theory, the enslavement, racism, in an environment that, is healthy and, educational. But they also get to experience the culture through music, dance, food, art. And so if you all don't mind, I'd like to take my last 60 seconds just to show you a summary from our Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Tour. Am I able to share my screen?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Let's see. Are you all able to see a video? Let me try this again. I'm sorry. Let me make certain I have it pulled up. All right, can you all see this where it says experience Gullah Geechee culture? Okay, let's see. Hopefully you can hear it.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I have a bad connection. Let me try it one more time. Kingdom, ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? I'm proud of it, kingdom, ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up for my cause, gonna take it home to my Jesus. Ain't that good news? Good news. I'm gonna roll the beat of the kingdom. Ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? I'm gonna roll the beat of the kingdom. Ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, my soul. Gonna take it home to my Jesus. Ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? Good news. Savior in the house. Good news. Ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? Savior in the house. Good news. Ain't that good news? Ain't that good news? I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up for my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus. Ain't that good news? Good news. Good news. Good news. Good news. So that's just a summary of our Gullah Geechee tour. And as you can see, we have worked with partners, tour operators that do what they do. So we don't go into destinations trying to reinvent the wheel. We go into destinations to identify small suppliers that do what they do and do it very well. And then what we do is we bring them together and we amplify their culture and heritage through these itineraries, again, as a way to drive economic benefit into their businesses and communities, but also as a way to provide transformative experiences for culturally curious travelers.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Stephanie. That was beautiful.
Thank you for having me.
It made me want to come on your tour.
Please come. We love to have you all.
And I think that's what we all have to share, some beautiful cultures, amazing food, beautiful art.
Oh, so
Wonderful
much amazing
stories.
food. I'm putting a website in the chat if you want to learn more about the tours.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I might just add, I really feel like cultural heritage tourism can change the world a little bit at a time. And that having these kind of immersion experiences and conversations is just so important. Because we're not having these conversations. People are not having these conversations in the world right now. Social media is yelling at one another and not conversation. The media is telling us, this and that. But for people to get together and talk and learn about one another is really important. And I'm just so inspired by the work that y'all are doing, Gail and Stephanie. And I do think it's really important, especially in today's world. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This concludes our session. So have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you all so much. I learned so much.
Yes, and I will share the video link with our registrants and our guests when that's up on our YouTube channel. So thank you all so much. Hope you have a great day.